Spoiler alert for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. If you've never seen the show and you're planning to, you might want to skip about 2 minutes into this episode. But also, is it even a spoiler if it's 25 years old? Anyway, the idea that Buffy the Vampire Slayer's reboot was canceled a few weeks ago before it even got off the ground is foolish. There's no way that show wouldn't have made almost every millennial happy, and also it would have made the corporate mouse millions of dollars. By season 3 of the original run of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, we were dealing with one of the greatest written TV shows of all time. It wasn't just clever and written like actual teens, but it had expanded beyond its Monster of the Week origins and become an intense and character-driven show with equal parts horror and comedy. Horror and comedy have so much in common. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but mostly you can't help how you react when you're either scared or you think something's funny. By season 6 of Buffy, we have several years of drama between each of the characters, and each week felt more grown-up and darker than the week previous. And then, Once More with Feeling comes on. And within 30 seconds, everyone's mind was blown. Singing? Are the demons that she's in the middle of fighting also singing? Is that choreography? What the hell show am I watching? It's important to note that this was way before any other network TV show started randomly inserting musical episodes into their series. And what makes Once More with Feeling stand out for me is that despite the idea of a musical not being in line with the seriousness of the rest of season 6 of Buffy, the episode moves the plot forward and ends on a really upsetting and really sad and really confusing note. I'd spent my life thinking I never liked musicals before seeing that episode. So then, afterwards, I went and saw the Evil Dead musical. And then I watched the DVD of Sweeney Todd. Sweeney Todd was bad. But what I realized is that musicals are way better with decapitations. I'm Josh Lindley, and this is Branching Out. You know who loves musical theater? Our guest today, Lynette Marrero. Lynette, before working at all your favorite bars in New York, hosting Masterclass, and co-creating Speed Rack, which is essentially the Once More with Feeling of cocktail competitions, was deep into all aspects of musical theater. Kaitlyn Stewart knew that, and I think that's part of why she mentioned Lynette a few weeks ago. Today, you'll hear us talk about how Lynette's history in musicals, as well as her post-secondary studies, have helped her along the way. She also, very casually, mentions a couple real heavy hitters. Here's Lynette Marrero on Branching Out. Hi, Lynette Marrero. Thank you so much for being on Branching Out. Rather than me reading a bio I never asked you to write, can you tell me who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. My name is Lynette Marrero. I am a New York-based bartender mixologist, but my work has been seen all around the world through organizations such as Speed Rack, which is an all-femme bartending competition that is a platform for diversity and inclusion, but also raises money for breast cancer research and education. That would be probably the big thing that we will talk a lot about today. I also have a bar in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn called Millie's Neighborhood Bar. So I've spent my career working in unspaces, bar spaces, predominantly in restaurant bars. So that's another place where my heart lies, is in the idea of how this hospitality industry can be bigger and broader, and kind of the growth of how that expanded to putting us in level with chefs and restaurants. And I guess some of the big things I have some products. I have an NA product called Aplos. I've worked on a product called DeLola with Jennifer Lopez, which is an RTD brand. So lots of things. I think if you know anything about me, it's about being, a jack of all trades, if you will. I guess a Jane.
Did you go to J-Lo's house for a party recently?
I went to Christina Aguilera's house
and
brought your past guest, Kaitlyn Stewart, as my guest for our masterclass.com reunion for 10 years, which Ryan Chediwardana and I did the class, which launched in March 2020. But yes, I've been at JLo's house for many DeLola affair, if you will.
It's one of those no big deal.
I kind of stopped being surprised at how many doors hospitality could open for you, because I think part of what is so exciting about it is that it is so unpredictable, and that the people we cross paths with come from so many different places. Cocktails, and I think even now seeing the NA cocktail movement have so many fans across different, disciplines that they all come to us eventually. So, everyone I know who's gotten great legal advice has met them in a bar.
Totally.
You like lawyers, they like cocktails, or business advice, or even if you look at things, like Sam Ross and Michael McElroy from Attaboy, like looking who their, investors in the past few years when they've expanded have been people in fashion, other places. So I think it's a really beautiful thing to see that we're kind of not an isolated community. We're quite in the middle of everything.
It's funny too, because the more, especially doing this, talking to different people in different aspects, everyone is still under the impression that being a bartender is such a unique and only we can possibly understand it. But here we are with the proof being that no, we aren't the only ones who understand it because we're getting investors from everywhere.
Right. And I think that's the part of turning us from, I think when this revival happened, which, you and I remember when we're all trying to find the dusty books and find the ingredients. Sometimes friends of mine would bring them from the border in Canada or vice versa
Mm-hmm.
for us to try different drinks. But I think that era has obviously passed. And the beautiful thing was about, growing this niche interest into something that is, seen everywhere, but also now giving it a new life, which I think you see so much of, how the newer bartenders approach it, that there is this true care for creativity and reinvention. And that's always what keeps something interesting.
Yeah, speaking of being past collecting old dusty books, we actually have people that we talk to now. And the way, Lynette, that you ended up invited onto Branching Out was not one, but two past guests mentioned how big of a deal you are to them specifically. And to make my job easier, I asked them questions to ask you. So I don't know.
I love this.
I don't know how deep you've gone back and listened to all the episodes, but I'm going to start with a question from Kate Chernoff, who
Okay.
she found out you existed through the masterclass program.
Right.
When she was trapped in lockdowns and wanted to learn about bars, you are the face and voice that she turned to. And Kate wanted to know
what her favorite job that she's had has been and why.
Oh man. So what has been my favorite job? I think I'm somebody who loves being out and with people. So I think it would kind of be the precursor job I had to being in bars, which I think also made my life in bars so much more impactful, was I did musical theater.
Mhm.
So I was doing all the pre-Broadway things, all the stuff, living in New York, staying in summers between college, auditioning, booked my first equity professional show my sophomore year of school and had to miss one class every Wednesday to do the matinee. What I loved about it was just that creativity every day. And that still impacts me because I see so many through lines with where we are today and how, when you're behind a bar, when you're in a hospitality space, having those skill sets of just wanting to, bring people into the show is so important. I think we do that now organically, but that specifically for me was the best training for the early years of this industry, to have that, under my belt. Because I think when we were speakeasy, we were playing a different kind of cosplay. But when we became more open, how you bring that artistry is a little bit louder and less quiet.
Did you ever make up that credit?
I did. I just took that class, pass, fail, and had to take a different class. It was early child developmental psychology. So there was a lot, but
I feel like that class specifically relates to running bars as well.
100%. My college degree was also very useful in the pathways to hospitality in the bar.
This relates to Kaitlyn's question for you as well. Because you're a musical theater kid.
I would ask her if she was to create a cocktail musical, because she likes musicals. If she was to create a cocktail musical, which cocktail or moment in history would she base it off of?
Oh, I think we've already done the Gatsby era, actually just doing Great Gatsby. It'd be better if they focused more on the actual cocktails. But there's been a long running joke with friends of mine that we would do more of a musical review and we would take it back to all of the classics. So you'd start with, scenes from The Muddler on the Roof. You'd would be one place. Bring a little West Side Story in with, when you're Fernet all the way, to a bit of kind of more of like the Titanic kind of review style where we just bring all of the puns in because that's the time. But in seriously, if we were going to really pick a time, it'd be like How to Succeed, Mad Men, I believe era would be the best for writing a good musical. Because I feel like there's just so much impact of like, that. I mean, maybe that's it. Mad Men the musical, and it's just a play and three martinis.
I don't know how many times you rehearsed that answer, but you nailed it.
Never been asked that, so I give Kaitlyn props for that.
Oh, that's so good. So at what point in your musical theater / educational career did you decide that bars was going to be the thing?
So I kind of dabbled, to be honest. And originally, I felt torn to get into hospitality because there was so much pressure around this time where, if you were working in hospitality, it couldn't possibly be your actual job. And so everyone would ask you, everyone would say they were an actor, and it was the most boring thing. So I was like, okay, well, I refuse to do that. So I started doing temp work in offices and basically was handling travel arrangements for, most of the people I graduated Columbia University with, which was kind of like, all right, I see you all starting to run companies, on Wall Street. But then I was out in San Diego doing a pre-Broadway show. I was doing Dracula the musical at La Jolla Playhouse, and 9/11 happened during the time that I was there. And me and a bunch of friends moved back in December, and we got an apartment in the East Village. We're like, great. They're actually giving, bartender actors at that time kind of considered to be the same actors a lease. And then I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to pick up this bartending thing in between shows. So I walked down to a wine bar that was opening on a street called Clinton Street, and it was called Punch and Judy. And I really didn't know much, but I had a good attitude and I was sharp. So I just answered their question, which was name 3 grape varietals. And I was like, oh, I don't know, I drink Pinot Noir, Merlot, and Sauvignon Blanc. They're like, great, you nailed it. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And I learned so much in that job too. So I was running the floor. It was a lot of detail, a lot of multitasking, running that place. I made great money. I loved it. And lots of the up and coming kind of culinary folks who we see now leading, like people like Wally Dufresne, he was opening WD-50, were coming in. So I was just exposed to all of these people that I didn't realize that much later would be more impactful. And then I just kind of kept going with it. I would do shows, I would take off time, and it was flexible enough for me to do that and go out of town and do, sit downs and workshops. But then kind of like in the, around 2008-ish, 2007, I just kind of found that, doing both, I was kind of dabbling in 2 different worlds, and I had to kind of choose one path. And if I was going to be really successful on this bartender side, that I was going to focus more on this and make this a career. And so that's when I kind of just went full time into the bar world.
So then after you've established yourself you've decided the bar is the way that it's going to go for you, how long into running bars and getting very good at making cocktails and working at some incredibly important and very cool bars did you decide to start your own production as well, which is Speed Rack?
That took a little bit longer. I think that wasn't such a linear path. It's kind of how things find you. Originally, so I was working at the Flatiron Lounge, which was the first solo bar of Julie Reiner, who we know from Ladies, Clover Club. And I was working there, and, it's run by, Julie, her wife, Susan Fedroff, who is still her business partner and life partner to this day. And I just saw that there were just very powerful women in charge and making the calls. I was inspired by that to kind of keep thinking of different ways I could start different businesses. The first business I actually started on my own was a cocktail catering company, which I use my moniker Drinks at 6, because I would notice, especially at this point, like all of my friends were getting married. And I was like, man, these cocktails at weddings are horrible.
They're so rough.
Why can't they just be so bad? I was like, why is this so hard to do? I saw volume at Flatiron. I'm like, this can't be impossible. So I started a company with a friend of mine. She and I were just kind of focused on that and didn't really have all the mechanics, but it did bring me into a different place of understanding like how to get clients and how to like consult for them and give them opportunities to rethink their drink strategy and be a part of designing menus. So that became a first step. Through that, then I started working in restaurant bars. I started working at a really great place called Freeman's, who Toby Maloney, who's one of my best friends and influences. I think one of the most genius writers. If you don't have the Bartender Manifesto, I'd highly recommend picking it up. But Toby worked in between lots of different spaces. He worked at Milk and Honey. He worked at clubs. He was working at Flatiron before he opened Pegu Club. And so he kind of just showed me there was lots of different places. So when I started working at Freeman's was like this back alley and still there, back alley, Lower East Side, rock and roll, gastropub, great drinks, just it looks like central casting when you go in. You're like, oh, this is an East Village spot. And that place started opening up more opportunities to me of meeting just a bigger range of guests. So some people would come in. I met Rob Cooper, who started Saint Germain back in the day. He came in and asked me to actually make my first original cocktail for him with the brand. And then he hired me subsequently to run events for him. So that all led to me kind of consulting. When I was consulting, I started putting together programs. And then after I left my first consulting job, I didn't know what I was going to do. I became a brand ambassador for the Time, Zacapa Rum, and all of the rums of Diageo, which had two other rums, Pampero and one called Orinoco. And through that job, I actually was forced to go to bars outside of my normal, purview. I wasn't just going to my friends' bars anymore, which were predominantly now run by men, because that my cohort was a lot of guys, a few were women.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started meeting all of these women in all these bars. And I was like, well, why don't I know them? This is crazy. They're so talented. They're amazing. One of the people who inspired the decision for me to start the first LUPEC chapter, which is Ladies United for the Preservation of Endangered Cocktails in New York, is a bartender named Erin Reese, who famously was at Maya Well and Deaf and Company. And so if you pick up any of those books, you'll see her name. But she was making a drink for submission for her Tales of the Cocktail. And I was like, this is so good. This bartender's incredible. So then I started kind of that, for lack of a better word, sorority for women in New York. There were chapters everywhere. There were chapters in Boston, Texas. Lauren Moat was starting one in Canada. And so we all found each other. So what I found at that point was that the sisterhood was everywhere, and we were all just waiting to weave our web and connect. So we did. And then through that, I met Ivy. I asked Ivy to join LUPEC, to give her more opportunities. And then Speed Rack was born, through that initial connection to then what it is now.
Mm-hmm. I know that Speed Rack obviously from the start felt fully formed. I don't know if it felt like that for you, but from the outside, seeing Speed Rack the first time, from the name, the theme, the purpose, all of it felt very well put together. And knowing that you spent that much time putting that together, working as a brand ambassador, connecting all these women, it makes more sense now that it seemed fully formed. Maybe one of those every overnight success is actually 10 years work.
Absolutely. It's like no one writes their first script and gets it produced into a film. It's usually a lot of different stories that lead up. And I think, just even Speed Rack, when it came up, Ivy came up to me in a bar. It was during Super Bowl, and he was like, hey, I have this idea of doing some sort of competition that, is only for women, and we'll call it Speed Rack, and let's do a charity angle like you do with the LUPEC stuff, and let's support breast cancer. And I was like, okay, great. And then we had to go and think about, well, what is this doing? What are we testing? What is the goal of the competition? And that was then to borrow from our Food Network world, right? And this is the first time of thinking, well, okay, here's how chefs show what they do. What we want to show is what bartenders do every day that is so extraordinary and so interesting to watch. So the whole competition is based on, it's Friday night, you're working service well, but you have to handle the 4 seats in front of service. And 4 of the most important cocktail people walk right in, right as you just get crushed with tickets. And you're like, I have to make their 4 drinks, and they better be damn good, but I also have to get them really fast because a lot of other people waiting for drinks. And that's how the competition was kind of created. And then the second part that we also felt was that, the passing on of education is super important. And we were super lucky in New York to have a lot of people who were writing the books. Dave Wondrich, Dale DeGroff, Audrey Saunders, all those people, Sasha Petrosky, were all in our backyard. And we were learning classics. You were constantly tested, because then also our clientele would ask for those classics over and over again, almost gotcha moments. So we felt that it was also really important to give the proper tool set to the women bartenders so that they had equal footing and opportunities for education.
So we've already sort of started touching on it with everyone that you had in your backyard. The point of branching out is that we talk about who inspires you and who brought you up and who brought you along. So I feel like now is as good a time as any. Lynette, who would you say your mentors or your pillars are?
So I get asked this question a lot, and I kind of feel like it changes every so often because it was kind of a collective of people. I kind of mentioned, watching Julie Reiner and Susan Federoff, run Flatiron Lounge was very inspiring because, especially even at that time, Julie did her own PR. So she was very much in control of what was said about the bar, what was said about the space, and paying attention to every detail. And I think what that really taught me was be control of your own narrative, even if you have outside PR help or anything. Being authentic, being who you are is the most important thing, and that will last the test of time. And I'll say, if anyone knows Julie, Julie is exactly who she is, what she says she is. And I think that authenticity is really important. I also saw her protect her name a lot, which I think, especially as younger bartenders, watching people be protective of their legacy is really important. A lot of people will offer you, whatever, dangle some carrot and not really give you a great opportunity. But I saw her on multiple times, call out either a brand or somebody who had used her name without her permission or were misrepresenting, and she would just call them out. So having that confidence to do that and not be like, oh, well, I don't want to upset them, I think was good for learning kind of how to stand your ground. I look at other people in this industry, like I mentioned, Toby Maloney. Toby has always been one of the more interesting people I've ever either sat at his bar or worked with.
Yeah.
And I think it's because he comes from that place of like, one, he and I also love cooking together. So like when we've been together, like at my house and we're just throwing together meals, it's totally also his vibe. So I think people who love food have always inspired me, and people like Toby who create in just a way that comes from so much passion and fun. At the same time of being able to, code switch and be as serious or as, understanding all of the time period and working within a Sasha Petrosky bar back at the, the mothership where it was so, restrictive because we had to pull way back, but then to understand when to pull the different levers, I think is a real talent. So also I think Toby in that same way of like people who just know who they are and bring every part of that to the table are the people who inspired me most throughout my career and who gave me the most opportunities to kind of flourish.
I think I can't think of a specific example right now, but I think something cool that you mentioned about Julie is that she's willing to call people out or point out issues, but I think she's also done a good job of recognizing when, I could have done that better.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? So there's so much of like being honest and being earnest. I think all of us, accountability is super important, right? It's about, everyone's going to make a mistake. All of us are doing this from, not most of us. There are now, luckily, and I'm so happy for them, bartenders who have come to this, who have gone to business school, who've learned a lot more than a lot of us. But yeah, you're going to make mistakes, and it's always about how you recover from those and not letting them define you and moving forward with the intention of, doing it better the next time or, and that's all you can do. And so that's why I think I was really lucky. And even looking at, how Julie opened, her bars and her spaces, very successful, but watching how much work went into that was really why I took a very long time to decide I wanted to do a bar where my name was on it, because not just consulting, because it's a lot of pressure. And for me, it's like that becomes the baby, and you got to really be ready to have the baby if you're ready for the baby, because it takes a lot of time. You can't just be like, I'm tired of it, I'm going to walk away. It's a lot of hardship, it's a lot of sacrifice, and thinking that way is really important. So I also did learn patience, and maybe waiting for different timing for me was kind of the pathway.
If obviously you and Julie have worked together and you're friends, if there's something you would ask Julie that maybe you haven't yet, what would it be?
Oh, yeah. You know what? I don't really know what Julie would have been if she didn't become a bartender. Like I know a lot of other people's like past stories, what they were really going to, but like I don't know what her other or what her backup plan to being a superstar bartender was. That'd be a really great question to ask.
And then same thing for Toby. What would you ask Toby?
Toby, I would ask Toby, wow, what would be the thing that he would stop bartending for?
Oh,
Yeah, because so he's probably one of the people I know who's just been doing it and doing it and doing it, and I'm always so impressed on how he reinvents, and obviously his writing journeys now I think are really beautiful, and it's a new part. But I'd be really curious to see what is the thing.
yeah. I'm super excited about that new book as well, where it's dealt with the same way as the Bartender's Manifesto, but it's all about classics. Pretty excited to read
Yeah,
that.
it's. I was lucky enough to pre-read and give some quotes prior to, and I just want to say, I love the way Toby writes, and
Mm.
I love the way Emma Jansen can interpret Toby, because it's such a magical thing to see the authors work together, because he's so specific, and for someone to understand his brain and let it shine on paper, but then organize it in this way is really incredible. So kudos to Emma. And I thought in this book, it felt like they had just so much incredible content for Manifesto that it became its own book itself, because they were like, oh, couldn't put that there. No, we can't put that there. But all the ideas were so, I could see them. They were the most perfect part two. And you rarely see that, I think, in cocktail books where the part two is so well written. Sometimes the one overshadows the other, but I think these two will stand alone as incredible books.
Yeah, the sophomore slump doesn't just apply to albums. And
Whereas I'm going to be controversial and say I think the Death and Co. Cocktail Codex is the better book than the
oh,
sophomore project.
hot take.
Hot take.
With all the work you've done with Speed Rack, you said it's 15 years that Speed Rack has been running now.
Yes, our 15th birthday is in June of this year. We are in season 14 in the US, which is our longest running market. But yeah, so here we are. We are heading into a fifth year for Mexico. I think it's, I don't know, sixth year for Puerto Rico, fifth or sixth year. We just went back to Australia in October for our third season. We did, I believe, four in Canada, so hopefully that will also, be able to reboot. But it's an interesting time when the international countries, when we start up again, because it's great. It just kind of shows, it kind of feels like we're back in the beginning, where we needed to revamp it here in the US. It found its new generation, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's regenerates itself, and so now I'm seeing it regenerate itself in other countries, and then that's great to just see that everyone's kind of moving to the same tune of all right, we have so many new bartenders, and we are looking for the right kind of metrics and mechanics for them to have opportunities and to grow in the ways that we were allowed to, and not giving them that opportunity is where I feel that would kind of be a bit unfair.
So do
So.
you feel like with all this work you've done with Speed Rack, all these different countries, literally thousands of bartenders at this point, it must be, is there anyone that you've taken under your wing that you, or maybe they would call you a mentor? I feel weird about calling anyone calls themselves a mentor. It's like giving yourself a nickname. But is there anyone that you've taken under your wing and you would say that you're mentoring?
Well, I mean, so many. So I think what's beautiful about it is that it's such a community, and it grows, and everyone then mentors each other. But there was a few seasons of bartenders that I became very close with through the Speed Rec universe. And I think we maybe started in minor ways in mentoring, and now have just grown to really great friends. And then there were some people who I was working with them, and I was their boss before they did Speed Rec, and then we have a different mentorship. So some people I would name would be Natasha Bermudez of the Seed Library, just opened in New York.
Mm-hmm.
She's definitely somebody who, I've been really lucky to see her grow. She came to me from Erin Reese, so there's a whole family lineage of getting to be in Natasha's life and seeing again that world. And Erin actually helped train her when she won New York too, so that's pretty great. I would say Karen Grill in Los Angeles is someone who I've stayed really, really close with through the world, and met her, when she was out bartending in LA, and then to see her rise through, different organizations and the brand world, and just being a really great trade advocate has been a delight. light. So I think we kind of all mentor each other, but those would be two folks who I know I'm really close with and that I see all the time. Tess Ann Sawyer, of course. We love Tess
Tess.
Ann, and someone who we knew back when she was doing Speed Rack New York and then Canada and then One Canada. And then, now she's stepped up in a major way to be a mentor to, newer bartenders for the Speed Rack family. So that's always really great.
Mm-hmm. Lynette, thank you so much for taking a half hour out of your day to talk about mentorship and Speed Rack and musical theater. If someone's looking for you, whether it's online or in person, how do they find you?
Okay, so they can find me. I'm at Drinks at 6, DRINKSAT, the number 6 on Instagram. Find us at speed_rack at Instagram. And if you're in New York and want to come check out Millie's, we're at Millie's YS on Green, GREENE. And you'll just see me around. So.
Also, can I ask you one last question before you go?
Absolutely.
Was it through musical theater that you discovered about fascia massages?
It's a combination of that, and also in New York we had this great, and we still do. Her name is Marcia Polas, and she works with tons of musical theater folks. I believe Laura Benanti is one of her clients, and dancers. And she found us through the USBG, the United States Bartenders Guild, of wanting to do more of these classes. I think she was just an enthusiast, would find us and look at all of us and be like, your fascia, your backs, you guys are not doing this. So she ran a lot of really great classes for that. And then I've continued work on my own personally through different kind of martial artists and more other pathways. But I think the health and wellness in this industry, when it started for us, it was a little later. I'm so happy that for, the younger generation, that it is front and center earlier on for them, because it's going to save them a lot of pain in the long run.
I know that the first time I met you in person, it was exactly that. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this again, Lynette. I will talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Huge thanks to Lynette for being on the show. That's someone that I feel fortunate to be around whenever I get the chance. If you've made it this far into the show, I'm guessing you like it. Let us know by liking it and subscribing, but mostly just tell your friends about branching out. If you're a bartender, please sign up to be on Bartender Atlas, or at the very least, follow us on Insta at Bartender Atlas. Branching Out is put together at AXXN Pact Studios in Toronto, written by me, additional research by Charlotte Cassanel, engineering by Jesse Colburn, other production, and all music by Aaron Verdonk. Talk soon. I've been making shows of trading blows.